You ever get that feeling, like when a brand new idea just kind of pops into your head
Yeah.
and suddenly everything clicks and it's
Yeah.
like a whole new world of possibilities opens up right in front of you? Well, that's exactly the kind of energy we're diving into today. We're taking a deep look at this graphic novel, Mouse, Bird, Snake, Wolf by David Almond.
And of course, we can't forget the incredible illustrations by Dave McKean.
Oh, absolutely. The art is just phenomenal. But yeah, the book itself, it really captures that raw creative power in such a unique way.
What strikes me right away, and this comes up a lot in the research you've gathered, is how seamlessly Almond's words and McKean's images work together. It's not just words telling a story, it's like they're building a whole world layer by layer with both the text and those almost dreamlike illustrations.
It's really something special. And that's what we're going to try to unpack today. We've got a ton of different perspectives on this book, and we're going to dig into all of them. What makes it so captivating? What are the possible meanings hidden beneath the surface? And why does this particular story, of all stories, seem to resonate so deeply with people?
And let's not forget the setting, right? This
Right.
world that Almond creates, it feels intentionally sparse, almost unfinished in a way.
You're right. It's like the gods kind of set the stage, created the mountains and the seas and the forests, but then they just stepped back and they left all these empty spaces, these blank canvases, just waiting for someone to come along and fill them in.
Exactly. And as the research points out, that sense of an incomplete world, that potential for something more, it's crucial. And that's where our main characters come in, Harry, Sue, and little Ben. Three kids who walk onto the stage and find themselves staring at all this potential.
And these kids, they're not the kind to just sit back and watch, are they?
Yeah.
They've got that classic childhood energy, that urge to explore, to create, to leave their mark on the world, even a world that seems half-finished.
And they don't need fancy tools or anything, just the simple stuff, Sticks, leaves, bits of clay. That's all it takes for their imaginations to run wild.
It's amazing what they come up with, too. Little Ben, he starts small, really delicate, creates this tiny little mouse that can squeak.
Just a tiny spark of life, a quiet addition to this big, empty world.
And then there's Sue. She's got that adventurous streak. She dreams up this bird, chirping away, flying through the air, filling those empty spaces with sound and movement.
It's almost like they're experimenting, right? Just testing out the power of their imagination, seeing what they can bring to life. Still innocent, still full of wonder, not quite grasping the full force of what they're capable of.
But then things take a turn, don't they? Harry and Sue, they decide to team up. Maybe they want to try something bigger, something more impressive. And together, they create something. Well, something much different.
They create a wolf.
A wolf. But not just any wolf. This one is described as scary, powerful, even menacing.
It's a huge leap from that little mouse and the bird. And in the research, this is where that sense of unease starts to creep in, like creating something so powerful, so potentially dangerous. Maybe that's not always a good thing.
And that contrast between those earlier harmless creations and this new intimidating wolf, it's so important. It sets the stage for what's coming next, this moment that everyone seems to focus on.
The turning point.
Exactly. This wolf, this creation of theirs, it turns on Harry and Sue. And in this really shocking, really terrifying scene, it eats them.
It's brutal and it's sudden. All the sources really emphasize that. The suddenness of the danger, how vulnerable the children are when faced with this thing they created. And now it's just little Ben left, the youngest one, all alone having to deal with this nightmare.
Imagine that. Little Ben, who started with that tiny little mouse, now he's the only one left standing against this monstrous wolf. Talk about pressure.
But here's the thing. Little Ben, he doesn't just freeze up. He doesn't even try to call on those gods for help. Remember, they're kind of portrayed as these lazy gods off doing their own thing, not really paying attention to what's happening down below.
They're totally hands-off, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So little Ben realizes he's on his own, and he decides to act.
There's a really powerful message there, isn't there? About self-reliance, about taking responsibility for the situation, even when it seems impossible.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is how he solves the problem. He figures out a way to unmake the wolf, to basically reverse the creation process and free Harry and Sue from inside.
Like hitting the undo button, but on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. It's like he instinctively understands the rules of their world, the forces at play when it comes to creation and destruction. But even though he saves his friends, the story doesn't just end with a nice, neat bow tied on top.
Right, right. There's this lingering feeling that this power, this ability to create, it could lead to more trouble down the line.
That's a crucial point. The ending isn't a simple happily ever after. It's more like a question mark. What will these kids do with this power? What other unexpected consequences might they face?
It's thought-provoking, for sure. Now, let's talk a bit more about our main characters. Harry, he's driven by curiosity, by this desire to create something big, something meaningful. But in a way, that ambition is what makes him vulnerable to the wolf, isn't it?
You could say that. He's so focused on the grand scale of the creation, on the impact it will have, that he doesn't fully consider the potential consequences. It's like a cautionary tale about ambition without foresight.
And then there's Sue, always up for an adventure, always eager to jump in and be part of the action. She helps create the wolf, and ultimately she shares Harry's fate.
It really highlights the idea that imagination, creation, it's not always a solo act. Sometimes it's a shared experience, and that means sharing the responsibility for what you bring into the world.
And then we have little Ben. He starts off with the smallest creation, almost insignificant compared to the others. But when everything goes wrong, he steps up in a big way. He shows that strength and ingenuity can come from the most unexpected places.
He's the one who ultimately saves the day, even though he's the youngest. It's like a reminder that courage and problem solving aren't tied to age or size or any outward appearance of power.
And we can't forget about those lazy gods, right? They set the stage, but then they completely disappear, leaving the kids to deal with the consequences of their own actions.
Their absence is so deliberate. It's like Almond is saying, look, there's no higher power here to bail you out. You're responsible for your own creations, for the good and the bad.
It's a world where you have to rely on yourself, on your own ingenuity and courage. Now, let's talk about the big ideas, the themes that Almond is exploring in this book. The research we have points to a few key ones. First and foremost, the power of imagination. These kids literally create living beings from their thoughts and a few simple materials. It's a pretty powerful metaphor for how our minds can shape reality.
And it's not just about the power, but also the responsibility that comes with it. The wolf is a stark reminder that what we create can have unintended consequences, and we have to be accountable for those consequences.
Absolutely. It's like a double-edged sword. You have this incredible power to create, but you also have a duty to consider the potential impact of your creations.
And then there's the exploration of good and evil. The transition from those harmless creatures to the menacing wolf suggests that both good and evil can exist within the act of creation itself. It's like a reflection of the duality within us, the potential for both light and darkness.
And through it all, we see the importance of courage and problem solving. Little Ben embodies those qualities perfectly. He's scared, but he doesn't give up. He faces his fear head on and finds a way to fix the situation.
He's an inspiration, showing us that even in the darkest moments, we can find the strength to overcome challenges.
Now, a lot of the research we have connects this book to other types of stories, like fables and creation myths.
It's interesting, right? Those ancient stories that try to explain the world, the origins of everything, and our place in it all. Mouse, bird, snake, wolf, kind of fits into that tradition, but with a modern twist.
And speaking of modern twists, there's also a clear connection to the work of Philip Pullman, the author of his Dark Materials. Both Almond and Pullman have this way of blending the everyday with the extraordinary, creating worlds that feel both familiar and magical.
And there are those recurring themes, too. Human ambition, the emergence of evil. These aren't lighthearted, fluffy themes. These are big, complex ideas, and Almond isn't afraid to explore them, even in a book that might seem like a simple children's story at first glance.
And if you're enjoying this deep dive into Almond's work, I'd highly recommend checking out some of his other books. We've got Skellig, Heaven Eyes, The Fire Eater, Kit's Wilderness, all fantastic reads that really showcase his unique style.
He's got this amazing ability to take these realistic settings, often rooted in his own childhood in Northeast England, and weave in these magical elements, these moments of wonder and awe. And he always tackles these big questions about life and loss and what it means to be human.
So let's talk a little more about David Almond himself, the man behind these stories. He's a highly acclaimed British author, known for his work in children's and young adult literature. He's won tons of awards, and his books are loved by readers all over the world.
And you can tell just from reading his work that he's deeply interested in the big questions. What is reality? What is the power of imagination? What is the meaning of life? He's not afraid to tackle those questions, even in books for younger audiences.
And it's not just the big questions. He also believes in the power of children's stories to help us understand the world around us, to grapple with our own emotions. He sees stories as essential tools for growing and learning, for making sense of life's complexities.
He really respects his young readers. He doesn't shy away from difficult topics, but he always presents them in a way that's thoughtful and engaging.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into mouse, bird, snake, wolf, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discovered. We've seen the incredible power of imagination, but also the weight of responsibility that comes with it. We've witnessed the birth of both beautiful and terrifying creations, reminding us that good and evil often exist side by side. And we've been inspired by little Ben's unwavering courage and his determination to find solutions.
And we have to acknowledge the brilliant way this story is told. The combination of Almond's words and McKeon's art creates a truly immersive experience.
It's a unique way to engage with these profound themes. And it leaves us with a final thought to ponder. Think about the children's experiences in the book. Now ask yourself, what wolves might we be creating in our own lives?
Not literal wolves, of course.
Right? Not literal wolves, but maybe metaphorical ones. Maybe it's a negative habit we can't seem to break, an ambition that's starting to harm us, or even careless words that have unintended consequences. What are the creations in our lives that have taken on a life of their own? Something we might need to confront and maybe even unmake. And what little Ben within each of us can rise to the challenge. Where do we find the courage to face our creations, to take responsibility for the good and the bad? It's all about finding that balance between the limitless potential of our imagination and the very real consequences of bringing new things into the world.
It's a question worth pondering. What will you create? And what will you do when your creations take on a life of their own?
That's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, but always remember the responsibility that comes with the power to bring something new into the world.